Good evening, everyone. It's 5:32 on August 22nd. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Town of Barnstable's Local Comprehensive Planning Committee. Good evening. Just going to read this notice of recording. The meeting will be televised live via Xfinity Channel 8 or High Definition Channel 1072. It may also be accessed via the Government Access Channel, which would live stream on the Town of Barnstable's website. In accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, the committee must inquire whether anyone is taping this meeting and to please make their presence known. Thank you. Okay. So first order of business, I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting of July 25.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, corrections? Okay. I would just want to abstain from the vote since I was not there because I had COVID. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? One abstention.
I need to abstain as well.
And Amanda is abstaining as well, too. Thank you. Okay. It's time for public comment. Is there any public comment? If so, please come to the lectern and announce your name. And we will, Lindsay, if you'll keep time, do
Certainly.
2 minutes, 3 minutes?
3.
3 minutes public comment. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. My name is John Crow. I'm Town Council Precinct 5. Just wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to say a few words today. First, there was no Zoom link on today's agenda. I think that's something that's important, but I understand what's going on with the town as far as having the staff to do that. But I think it's important in this meeting that we try to get that done if possible. Because I also know a couple of people who wanted to get on Zoom today and couldn't get it because they were working. So let's try to do that. I'm here to ask you to take this exercise back to the villages. Ask if residents want zoning changes, what type, and if so, where. Ask them if they want their village centers to be redeveloped. If so, exactly how. The first round of village meetings had less than 0.5% of our residents taking advantage of that. And there was not an actual comment opportunity during those events, and I went to a number of them. If we don't capture public opinion now, what will happen is this will move along without reflecting the public will, and the public will come out in force when it gets before the town council. I personally believe we need to do a better job, starting with public education about what is being proposed, and then actually listening, then incorporating what residents have to say within this LCP plan. I plan to bring the need for outreach to my fellow councilors and the necessity of this committee doing what it said at its exception, which is going to where people are and then capturing that public will in the plan. We're just not here we're just not there yet, and I hope we together can raise awareness and public engagement. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Bob Schulte. I'm a resident of Centerville. I believe many of you know that I'm a member of and the chair of the ad hoc committee to review and assess zoning and the use of regulatory agreements in the town. I'm here tonight primarily to listen to the start of your committee's exercise for mapping the town's future land use maps. However, I would like to point out there is a significant overlap with regards to zoning when it comes to the work of this committee, the ad hoc committee to recommend strategies for housing creation, and my committee, the ad hoc committee to review and assess zoning. All three committees are working with the Planning and Development Department as well as the Planning Board in some fashion. Our committee members have spoken with Jim Kupfer and Steve Robichaud and have let them know that we feel it is extremely important that these committees not work in silos without an awareness and consideration of the work of the other committees. We've spoken with Jim and have asked him to look into the possibility of arranging a joint meeting or at least inviting representatives of the other committees to attend some of our meetings. As our committee is starting to discuss the zoning issues, I can tell you the feedback I'm hearing from residents is that they are very interested and concerned with the town's future land use maps. I would suggest that to you that it is essential that you roll these discussions out to each of the individual villages in the form of meetings with residents to ensure they have the opportunity to provide to you their input on this very important topic. I hope you consider that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'd like to move to the overview of tonight's exercises. And
Don't get response to public comment?
no, I don't. I think if Jim does his overview, that's going to address some of that, and then we can
Okay.
we
so
can talk
don't-
about
okay,
that.
No
That's
problem.
all right, Asia.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. Good evening, everyone. Jim Cupford, Director of Planning, here before you tonight to talk about our land use map and our next steps here in the local comprehensive plan. Just want to thank you all we're almost up on 2 years now of your efforts to work through the local comprehensive plan and all the efforts that surmounted to tonight. The first year of developing out existing conditions and going to the residents, certainly what didn't go unnoticed, as well as year two of developing out all of the goals and strategies that you guys have built for each of the land use sections. Tonight, you have in your hands, in your package, land use goals and strategies that were developed, again, over the course of the year. And that's really to help you in your deliberations as you're looking at the current map and discussing what the future may hold. So tonight, really, that's the primary focus of our evening. This is a little washed out, but before you and once we enter our group breakout sessions, and the handouts, I believe there are some here, and we can make more copies if anybody needs some, is the current land use map. And what that is building on our 2010 current land use map. So this is an update. So we're updating the previous land use map with some small tweaks. We removed the transfer station as it didn't seem relevant. We updated some highlights in terms of new anchors and some proper wording for where the growth incentive zone, and added the resource protection overlay district for your understanding. So for those who may not be familiar with our current land use strategy, Barnstable, while it is a very diverse and somewhat convoluted community, we actually have a very refined land use strategy. We have our growth incentive zone, which we sit in today, which is downtown Hyannis. We incentivize growth here in downtown Hyannis. We have looked at strategies to redevelop abandoned and underutilized properties here in downtown Hyannis. We have our commercial and industrial districts, which is in the green there, and we actually have commercial corridors, which is our light purple. Predominantly, though, the western half of our community, with some nuances here and there, are 2-acre single-family zoning. So our west side, our left side, I like to call that a lightning bolt. And when anybody comes in to discuss their property, I inform them of the resource protection overlay district and their 2-acre single-family zoning. So we actually have in my opinion, a great planning dynamic of growth incentive in a certain area and the protection of our resources in another. So that is really the foundation of our starting point. You have goals and strategies that talk about, our next 10 years. What are our priorities? What are our needs? Do we need to protect additional land, and where is that? Do we need to look at our commercial corridor again? Do we need to shrink that commercial corridor? Do we need to expand that commercial corridor? And where is that? Where is our infrastructure? You'll see in the back we have some supporting maps to help in that conversation. We have the CWMP map in the multiple phases, so that can help inform you in the discussion. But this right here is the current land use map. There's, hopefully, at the end of tonight and probably a couple more sessions, we begin to develop out what the future land use map is. That is not determined today, and it's up for this committee to determine with the help of our public. Speaking of our public, we have, again, the handout that's here today. We can make a lot more copies and distribute it to all of our typical locations for further public input. We also have our a mapping tool that will be going live after tonight that essentially allows you to do this and what the committee is doing tonight right online and helps you plot areas that you want to protect, that you want to see, our working harbor further producing certain aspects, that we want to, look at Independence Park. There's been a lot of great discussion about what to do at Independence Park, and maybe there's some thought process as to what the future land use looks like for that location. I know a lot of us are discussing or heard about, what zoning is going to take place. That's not necessarily what you guys are talking about tonight. That is one action aspect that could take place. But what are we talking about in terms of the future land uses in the specific areas of our community? And zoning is one small tool in that toolbox. We had a long, robust discussion about our water quality. Certainly keeping that in mind, all the great presentations that you guys have consumed in terms of how water flows through our community, our sole source aquifer, and how can we protect that? And how can we balance that with our future needs? So tonight, we hope to have a good, robust discussion. I know Kate and team has divided the two groups that we typically do, the two groups for goals and strategies, but understanding that we don't want to talk over each other. We have one group that can go into the Selectmen's Conference Room, and that will be regarding things like natural resources. Is that right? Natural resources, and then the other group will be over here in terms of things like economic development. So we brought that, split that off so that you guys can all have a chance to work through those. We may shift through this meeting, we may shift at the next meeting. What the hope is, my understanding and with the chair's permission, that the public can join and listen in on the conversation. We have the handouts for the public to provide their comments. And then we would hope to unveil the public comment tool for maybe a month's time for the public to provide input and guidance back to the committee, if that's okay with the chair and vice chair. And with that, I know Jeff Davis from Horsley Witten's going to go further into what our activity is tonight. Hopefully I didn't steal his thunder at all. And then we'll break into our groups.
Can I say something before we go out?
Can you just hit pause for a second, Asia?
I'll wait till after.
Yeah, okay. So I think that the most salient points there are that we have a robust public outreach program electronically and non-electronically for people to feed information into the land use map. And we have a pretty sophisticated, well-designed map at the moment that probably exceeds what a lot of communities have. Just saying that there's been a lot of background there. I don't see a lot of magnificent change coming at us, but we're totally open to the conversation. So we will have digital tools for people to use online. If you don't feel comfortable with that, you can go to a local library that will help you access the digital tool, or you can come and do all the paper routine. But we will be definitely taking your comments on what gets developed. So, okay? So, sorry.
Thank you all. Jeff Davis with the Horsley Witten Group. Be here on a beautiful day, and I will try to keep my piece as short as possible.
I don't think your mic's on.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
That's better.
Much better. I was going to say, do you hear me? I don't hear my microphone.
TV did, so you're good.
Jeff Davis with the Horsley Witten Group. Thank you again for having me this evening. I'm going to try to keep my presentation very brief so we can spend the majority of our time in discussion. Also, it is a perfect late summer day in Cape Cod, and I want you to be able to go out and enjoy it, and maybe the Jazz Fest along Main Street. All right. So fortunately, Jim did steal a little of my thunder, which is great because that means I can talk less. But just wanted to use this time to remind everyone where we've been and where we are today. So back in November of last year, we started this conversation around land use with the intention that we'd start by looking at the 2010 plan, and then over the course of the next several months, going over all these other topics that we've been discussing as a group, from natural resources to historic preservation to transportation to economic development, that given all that knowledge, that we would be coming back to address land use and see if you feel differently about the land use map based on all the other things we've discussed. So as a reminder, the draft land use chapter is organized around a number of land use types, including residential and rural areas, regional economic center, downtown Hyannis, or the GIZ, GIZ, the village centers, the commercial nodes, and maritime areas. Now, all the goals and strategies are built around that structure currently. Some other principles, basic principles behind the draft land use chapter. One being compact development, meaning development in areas with opportunities for people to walk and work and play and take care of other necessary pursuits. And that can happen in one of two ways. That can be infill and redevelopment. Again, one of the goals of that growth incentive zone where we are now is that you absorb a lot of those needs where you already have development and infrastructure. And also cluster development. So if we are going to build new things outside this area, making sure that that is clustered and minimizing the impact on the natural open space around it. We also have some other land use issues that aren't necessarily falling under any particular land use type. So non-conforming uses, meaning those uses that do not conform with the use standards of the zoning districts in which they are located. Generally speaking, in this town, that means commercial uses that are in a residential zone today. And many of these will transition from commercial to residential over time unless you choose to change the rules and allow them to be maintained into the future. Another piece is use variances, and these are, you already have in zoning a whole list of things that are allowed in each zoning district. So in theory, if that zoning is spelled out very clearly, you should have no need for use variances. And there are certain villages in the town today where you prohibit use variances altogether. And so another question for the group is, are there other village areas or areas of town where you would want to expressly prohibit these use variances? So now to get into future land use planning and slash strategic planning areas. So your 2010 LCP refers to these areas as strategic planning areas. When I'm talking about future land use, strategic planning area, I'm using those interchangeably, but just noting that your 2010 plan uses the terminology strategic planning areas. Same thing. But these are designations for the future land use in terms of density, character, location of land uses, and in often cases is the basis for any zoning changes that might be needed as a result of the LCP, although of course the LCP itself does not change zoning. In general, this future land use map or these strategic planning areas are describing areas of change and areas of stability. Where you expect to see a change, where you expect to see additional development, and where you're saying, no, we want to preserve what's there, whether it be natural resources or an existing neighborhood where you don't expect to see changes within the time frame of the plan. So again, you've got hard copies of this in both rooms, and we'll be discussing this. I'm sorry, I have on my slides, future land use map. This is your current land use map. Oh, you changed the slide for me. Thank you very much. Jim caught that mistake on my part. So what we want to talk about tonight is, does this map accurately depict the future you want to see in Barnstable? Are there areas that we should be looking at for additional change? Are there areas where you don't want to see change that's not reflected on this map? So as described, the group that stays in this room will be focusing on those areas of change. Where should additional development occur, or where should changes to land use be explored? And the room next door will be that yin and yang conversation. What are the areas that should stay the same? What needs to be protected? In some cases, what areas maybe need more protection even than exists today, where you might want to scale back over time on the development that's been allowed to occur. And we'll note as well that you have an opportunity with the place-based strategies that you've been given in the matrix. If there are any of those strategies that you would like to talk about where they should be applied to on the map, we can have that conversation as well. Before we break out, though, I did just want to remind everyone about what the different land types are that are represented on that map. So first and foremost, the residential and rural areas. This by far makes up the largest land area in the town. And it's a significant area, and I think we can use this evening to start refining what you expect to happen in which parts of this large area of town. So what areas should be prioritized for long-term conservation? You have a tool of cluster subdivisions. Should we be talking about requiring cluster subdivisions anywhere within this area? We have the outline for the RPOD, and you know that that requires 2-acre zoning with a single-family home. If you take all the remaining developable land on that portion of the map and divide it up into 2-acre parcels, is that the future you want to see? Is that adequate for your future? So we want to talk about what some of the trade-offs are for uses in that part of town. And we also want to talk about, the last time we got together, this group was brainstorming ideas for, do we need another growth center in the future? And if so, where would that be? So we want to give you the opportunity to revisit that tonight. Next, the Regional Economic Center. So this is the area around the mall and some of your industrial uses. And so a question for this area, would it be helpful to divide this into 2 sections? One that's devoted to industrial uses and another that's devoted to commercial and mixed uses. Should we consider as a group prohibiting housing within the industrial section to make sure that those critical uses in that industrial section remain to serve both Barnstable and the surrounding communities in the Cape? And are you comfortable with the existing commercial areas evolving over time to more of a mixed-use environment? So those are some of the questions we would like to get at this evening for that area. Next, downtown Hyannis, where we are right now. Again, I think Jim is right. You have some of the most robust and well thought out and fine-grained land use planning for this area of nearly anywhere on the Cape. So tonight we want to discuss, do we continue to encourage infill development around us here and adaptive reuse? Are we staying the course with your recent form-based zoning, or is that something that should be looked at again? And one thing that really came up a lot during the course of this process, where can we look for more small-scale open space and improvements to the public realm that make downtown Hyannis more livable? Next, and something that continues to be a driving force in this plan, and certainly the public discussion around this plan, are the village centers. And I completely agree with everyone who has spoken, and I know it's the intention of the town to continue to have specific planning conversations around each of the village centers and their future. So I don't expect this group to reach those definitive conclusions, but we want to start thinking about tonight which of the village centers really are best suited for preservation, historic preservation, minimal, if any, new development, as well as the areas immediately surrounding those village centers. So you'll notice on the maps, there's the areas that are currently zoned for mixed use around each of the village centers, with the exception of Katuitt, which is strictly residential zoning. And then there's a buffer around that. So we want to talk tonight as well about what should be happening immediately adjacent to these villages. Are any of them appropriate for different uses or growth or different types of housing, and which of them should remain the same, and also, of course, at what scale. And we want you to discuss this at both rooms tonight. So this room will be talking more about which villages might be more appropriate for absorbing different types of development, and in the other room we'll be discussing which should really be staying the same and being preserved. Next, there are a series of commercial nodes, commercially zoned land throughout the town outside the GIZ and the Regional Economic Center. And so we want to know, should all of these areas allow commercial residential mixed use? Are there any places where ground floor commercial uses should be required to make sure that these don't transition entirely to residential and they are keeping those neighborhood serving commercial uses? And finally, on the flip side of that, are there any of these places where over time you would rather see them be residential only, where the commercial uses are maybe problematic or causing issues with the neighborhood? Next, maritime areas. And these are really those areas that are dependent on their location near the water. Obviously, I think none of these are going anywhere. They're really critical both for your economy and your culture. But are there expectations that any of these maritime areas might expand? Are there other places where those water-based, marina-based uses might expand over time? And then finally, just some other thoughts. We brought this up earlier. Are there parts of the residential and rural area maybe really close to the village centers, adjacent to the downtown, adjacent to other mixed-use areas that might be appropriate for different types of housing other than single-family housing at a small scale? Are there any non-conforming commercial uses that you're aware of that are beloved in the community that you want to make sure are here 10, 20 years from now, and you don't want zoning to inadvisedly be phased out over time? And just in general, are there any other areas of change that aren't represented on this map that you think we should be discussing as a community? So, I think that was pretty concise. Yes, Avery.
I don't see conservation areas, places that are already considered conservation areas on any of these maps. And when I look at them, I see blank open space, and I can see people going, ooh, let's do something there. Why are they not delineated? And
so that's one of the main points of tonight. So that's been one of my major criticisms of the 2010 map, is that the rural residential area is a big blob, right? And so I think one of the primary foci of the conversation in that room tonight is to have this group and the public start to refine that. We have maps in there that show where the existing conserved land is, where the biomap natural resources are, and I'm hoping that that can give this body and the public more tools to have a more refined map, because I completely agree. And again, I think that's one of the main purposes for tonight, is to refine those areas. Any other questions before I describe the breakout rooms?
Sure. So I have a few questions for you. I've had a couple of questions ever since prior to this starting. Right? So I did want to, make a comment, and then after that, go ask you a question. So one thing I've learned as someone who is probably one of the few renters in this room at the current moment, one of the few people working class, not making a lot of money, we talk about these plans in hypothetical situations, not really taking account of the actual people that may be impacted. So what I did over the past 2 months is I reached out to over 900 renters to talk to them about what they felt about these plans. I pulled their number through Vote Builder, called these people. And the one thing that I'm seeing is that us renters, a lot of us are being left out of the conversation. We're looking at these plans and the zoning is overly cumbersome, where the average millennial and Gen Z person cannot afford to buy a home as it is. So we're talking about these future plans when it comes to building homes, single family zoning and things of that sort, but we're not really taking into consideration that the average millennial and Gen Z who will be here in the future, what these plans are being made for, can't afford any of these houses that are being built right now in the area, can't afford to rent half of these apartments that are being built in this area. None of them being built right now are under $2,500. I'm a working class individual and I talk to working class individuals every day. I don't think that they can afford that. So I think that a lot of these zoning laws we're talking about are overly cumbersome for builders and developers, for people who are trying to build rentals on their land where they live at now. Some of the people who live in some of these rural areas, we're talking about a lot of homeowners versus renters. Yes, Barnstable is mostly homeowners, but we got to take the renters in consideration. And to be honest with you, I say we throw away some of our zoning policies and make sure that we have enough housing for the people that are living here that are tripled up, doubled up in a single studio because they can't afford to pay the rent here year round. So we need to do something. And I just wanted to make that clear. Do you think that some of these zoning laws are basically useless when it comes to making sure that we have an adequate housing stock for the population that's here? I know Maura Healy has talked about the amount of houses that we need to build and the type of housings that we need to build. I don't hear anyone talking about making sure that we have housing that is built with multi-unit housing that is for people who are single, might want to have a roommate, mixed-use housing. We're not really talking about that in our plans. We're not talking about that in our non-village centers. We're only talking about housing types that are making it for people, no offense, that the people that can afford it in this area are mostly over 60. In about 40 years, 50 years, my generation is going to be the ones that are in the positions. We want walkable, livable areas where we can walk places, and I just figure we should try to work on that as well.
And thank you so much for always bringing that perspective to the table, because it isn't always represented, and I appreciate that. I'm not going to comment on your zoning. I will say it is some of the most complex zoning I've seen. It's pretty darn complex.
It's hard.
It is hard. And I think one of the reasons, again, one of the things we want to talk about today, we talk in the draft land use chapter about the need for these smaller scale multifamily opportunities, so between 3 units and 12 units. So not,
Big,
massive
just
things,
something.
but like, things are going to be more accessible to exactly the types of people you were talking
People
about.
making under $60,000 a year
Exactly.
can't find housing here unless they're tripled up. Or
Absolutely.
I don't make $60K a year right now, so like I live in an income-based unit, but people can't find anywhere to go once they get into an income-based place. So what are we doing?
Right. So that's one of the things we want to talk about tonight is where are the areas of town where we can open up to
Right.
that type of housing. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the breakouts are important for you to reiterate.
No, I know,
that,
but I
Sharon.
wanted it on the record so that everyone could
Yeah.
know my viewpoints.
Okay. Any other questions?
We good to go into breakout?
All right. Yeah. So, oh, sure.
Oh, Cheryl has something?
I just want to make sure, and maybe I am stealing Jeff's because I see it right at the bottom there. But we're going to make sure we report out all the conversations that have taken place during the breakout session, so it's recorded and so it can be on record. But I once again stole your thunder. I apologize.
Just means we're on the same page.
I just wanted to thank our guest speaker tonight for a very comprehensive delivery presentation of what we're going to be doing.
Thank you. And I will leave you with some parting thoughts as you divide and conquer tonight. Just want you to be thinking about the following things in the back of your head as you're having your conversations. Where will change be implemented? So again, we're trying to make this as place-based a conversation as possible. Where has or should the town change its policies to implement these strategies? Are there specific places where you want to see specific things? So do not feel afraid to grab a pen, and this goes for the public as well, and draw on the maps, write things down, play with the maps. They're there to be used and drawn on. What are the trade-offs implied in these choices? And I think, Asia brings up a great point. We can stop building today, and that will have a series of benefits. It will also have a series of trade-offs that are going to make life really difficult for a lot of people. And then finally, are there certain principles or performance standards that should guide the placing of these strategies? So some things we may not be able to place on a map today, but we can say, as a community, these are the principles we should be using to make these decisions into the future. So again, not to have definitive answers for any of those things, but please just approach the questions with that in mind. And with that, also encourage you to split up as evenly as possible. If we find that more people are going to one room versus the other, I mean, the public may do as you choose, but in terms of the committee, we will try to split you evenly if we see an imbalance. Thank you so much. Oh, that was not the plan, but we can do that. You comfortable with that? All right. Then we will keep time, and at half an hour, we will get on the microphone and yell switch.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for the great conversation this evening. Again, Jim Kupfer, Director of Planning. I volunteered to report out for both groups. I talked to the consultants and got kind of the summary of what the conversation was. So I'll just recap. But again, all of you participated, so please feel free to fill in any of the blanks. But again, just kind of working on a high level here and talking about what we truly want to see change over the next 10 years. Looking at this land use strategy map, we have a dynamic here of growth versus preservation, and so what we want to keep the same and what do we want to change. And I thought Dylan, one of our consultants, asked a very great question. A great question is, what would you miss if it was gone? And what I heard, it was a phenomenal answer, is you'd miss most your drinking water, right? So I thought that was pretty. It was inspirational in terms of that response, and so kind of pulling from that, and that actually. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised, right? So our vision is in the back there, and that's right there on the top priority is our water quality. So I'm just going to list off a few things that I jotted down based on the conversation. Obviously, the conversation will continue. Planning at scales. So right now we're talking about high level, and so how do we get to that specificity of different lots or different areas? This conversation, this specific map will begin to talk about areas, but actions we could create that will impact very specific lots could be a part of our conversation, part of that matrix that you have there. And I'll give you one specific example that I heard. One group was talking about the preservation of our open space, and not just the open space that is deed restricted or in conservation restrictions or whatever it might be, or the ones that are in flood zones or sandy neck that's clearly preserved, but these vacant wooded lots, and how can we zoom into that and preserve potentially some of those. So thinking about what kind of policy could go in place is a very specific creative action that we could add to the plan. Might not lend itself to the map itself, but a great policy to consider. One specific action item of change potentially in the map that I heard was historic Centerville Village, and maybe we're talking about rather than activity center or a village center, maybe rephrasing that, and making that historic preservation center or historic village center for preservation or something to that effect. And I'm sure there's maybe others. That was the one specific talked about this evening. We heard a lot about opportunities for new housing. And one of which was talking about short-term rentals, and maybe, again, this would be more of a policy, but when we're thinking about future homes, maybe this is, again, a policy that we tack onto the action plan of talking about short-term rentals and their impacts, and maybe the opportunity of opening up year-round housing that with a housing stock that's already in existence. Thinking about, so that we had maps out there for the comprehensive wastewater management plan and all the future phases. And so, the next phase, the next 10 years brings us down the spine of 28. And so thinking about the policies that we might want to consider for that specific area, it quite matches the commercial corridor along 28, more or less. And so maybe we're rephrasing, again, what that commercial corridor is, and thinking about, minimal development area when sewer comes in, thinking about policies again for that specific location. Some very place-based areas. Independence Park. This has been a repetitive theme all throughout our 2 years, really. Is thinking about maybe a master plan for that area. Maybe it's a new village, Independence Village, and so marking that there and clearly identifying that needs to be a planning area for discussion in the very near term. And what would that look like? And so again, this map isn't meant to answer that question. This map and those action strategies are meant to stimulate our conversations for planning in the future. So when we have a map that says Independence Park, future master plan, and an action that says we need a master plan for this area that promotes XYZ, that gives us the ability to then come back and say, all right, year one, that's one of our top priorities. Let's figure out what Independence Park is, and let's create a master plan for that area. Same thing with maybe to a lesser scale, the Cape Cod Community College area. We talked a lot about the community college, and the other amenities there, as well as the park and ride and the bus. Maybe there is some future opportunities there. That could certainly be mapped. Let's see, and then one of the kind of repetitive comments that I heard was the concerns for our commercial corridors and the traffic that it may create, or it does create, and if future development were to go there, how would that look? So considering again those commercial corridors, are those the commercial corridors we want to see into the future? Are there new ones? And if there are new ones, should we be thinking about those traffic impacts and the uses that are allowed in that area? I heard a lot about the Resource Protection Overlay District and understanding better the protections that are in there and the protections that are not, whether 2 acres is an appropriate level, and we could have some more conversations there. I did hear a lot about wanting to get some more interactive mapping involved. Obviously, we have our interactive tool that I implore everyone to take a peek at. But maybe between now and the next meeting, I'll certainly work with our committee leadership to think about how we can get that involved in our next conversation so that we can kind of zoom in on some of these specific areas and really get to a final map that says, this is again, we talk about our growth incentive zone, we talk about our protection overlay district, we talk about, our commercial, our large big box commercial, our industrial. We need to make some specific suggestions as to what stays the same and what needs to be different. So those are the first comment, the first list of comments. Again, to the committee, if there's anything that I missed, I welcome those comments as well.
Thanks. Anyone have any other further comments? I think I will echo one comment that was made to me by a member of this group, is that we thought it was a productive conversation, public and committee. We thought that probably has been missing in prior opportunities when we get together. Instead of having you all there and us over here, we don't have a ton of time to deliberate amongst ourselves, quite honestly. But so this created a lot of conversation back and forth. I think I saw more people agreeing with each other that typically haven't in the past. Not that that's a breakthrough, but I think it just felt productive. So with that said, I just want to go on the record that I received a piece of correspondence, or I received a message from Councillor Chris Clark, who wanted to make sure that we were accommodating for municipal water parcels. So I think it's in there, but I'm just putting that on the record. Our next meeting is September 12th at 5:30 to be held here in person. We have sent you all meeting calendar notices. Please hold on to those. We are expecting to have more work, not less work, and certainly when we get into more of our public outreach, we're going to be spending quality time together. So please plan on that. Any other items to come before the council? You're good? Okay. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. See you at the next meeting.